The sun was fading over Stonehaven when she arrived, a wildeed mare, her coat matted with blood and mud sides, heaving around her swollen belly. She collapsed just feet from the shelter doors as the storm broke overhead. No one could get near her, but then a small girl with rain-soaked blonde hair stepped forward. And what happened next would change everything. This is a remarkable story of a pregnant Mustang who fled captivity to find safety for her unborn FO, and the extraordinary child who somehow understood her desperate plea. When Theodore Grant arrives to reclaim his property, the shelter staff must make an impossible choice. But as Ember's condition worsens and her foe's life hangs in the balance, it's 8-year-old Hannah Brooks who will attempt something no adult would dare, a last-minute intervention. So moving it left everyone in tears. Before we jump back and tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Thunder rolled across the valley as dark clouds gathered over Stonehaven. The first heavy raindrops began to fall, striking the metal roof of the Stonehaven Animal Shelter with a rhythmic patter that would soon become a downpour inside. Dr. Carmen Vasquez glanced worriedly at the darkening sky through the window of a cramped veterinary office. "I hope everyone remembered to secure the paddock gates," she muttered, gathering patient files from her cluttered desk last. "Thing we need is another escape during a storm." Allison Brooks looked up from the reception counter, where she was finishing the day's paperwork. Diego checked everything before he left, said the forecast looked bad, Mom. Come quick. The urgent voice belonged to 8-year-old Hannah Brooks, who burst through the shelter's front door, her blue eyes wide with excitement. Rain had already soaked through her yellow raincoat, leaving puddles on the linoleum floor. "Hannah, what have I told you about running off?" Allison scolded, rounding the counter. "You're supposed to be in the play area." "But, Mom, there's something outside. I saw from the window, something big coming up the road." Dr. Vasquez set down her files. "Probably just Mr. Wilson's cattle breaking fence again." Hannah shook her head vigorously, sending water droplets flying. "No, it a horse, a wild one. And I think she's hurt." The urgency in the child's voice made both women exchange concerned glances. Dr. Vasquez grabbed her emergency kit from behind the counter, a well-worn leather bag that had seen countless emergencies over her 15 years as Stonehaven's only veterinarian. "Show us Hannah," she said, "but stay behind me." The three pushed through the shelter's double doors into the rain, which was now coming down in sheets. Lightning flashed, illuminating the gravel driveway leading to the country road. At first, Dr. Vasquez saw nothing but the curtain of rain, but then Hannah pointed toward a dark shape moving unsteadily along the road's edge. There, see, the figure staggered forward, emerging from the gloom, a mare, her chestnut coat darkened by rain, and what appeared to be mud or blood. Even from this distance, the swollen belly was unmistakable, pregnant and far along. "My God," whispered Allison. "Where did she come from?" As if in answer to Allison's question, the mare lifted her head, revealing a face marked with cuts and a wild, desperate look in her eyes. She took 3 more faltering steps toward the shelter. Before her legs buckled, she collapsed heavily onto the wet gravel just 20 feet from where they stood. "Hannah, stay back," Dr. Vasquez called, already running toward the fallen animal. Allison grabbed her daughter's shoulder, but Hannah shrugged free. "She needs help," the child cried, moving forward. Despite her mother's protest, Dr. Vasquez approached the mare slowly, speaking in soft, soothing tones. "Easy, girl, easy now." But as she drew closer, the horse's eyes rolled in terror. With tremendous effort, the mare tried to rise, front legs flailing dangerously. "Carmen, be careful," Allison shouted over the rain. Dr. Vasquez retreated a few steps, studying the animal with professional eye. The mare's breathing was labored, and now she could see the source of some of the blood, a long gash across her right flank, as if she'd forced her way through barbed wire. But there was something else troubling about her appearance. That's no ordinary wild Mustang. Dr. Vasquez says Allison joined her a safe distance. "Look at those marks on her withers. Even through the mud and blood, the telltale scars of rope bones were visible. Someone's been trying to break her," Allison murmured. "Recently, too. And not gently," Dr. Vasquez added grimly. "We need to get her inside before she goes into shock, but I can't get near her like this." The mare's eyes were wide with terror as she looked from human to human, her sides heaving with exertion and pain. Every time Dr. Vasquez tried to approach the horse with thrash, endangering both herself and her unborn. "I need the tranquilizer gun from my truck," Dr. Vasquez decided, turning back toward the shelter. "Allison, call William. We'll need help moving her once." She sedated. "Wait," the small voice came from behind them. Hannah stood in the rain, her blonde hair plastered her face. "Let me try." "Absolutely not," Allison said firmly. "This isn't like the shelter dogs." "Hannah," She's wild and injured. She could kill you with one kick. But she's scared, Mom. She's just scared, and she doesn't understand we want to help." Before either adult could stop her, Hannah took a slow step forward. Then another Dr. Vasquez reached the child, but Allison placed a restraining hand on her arm, her eyes, never leaving her daughter, Hannah Brooks. "You stop right there," Allison commanded, but there was a hint of uncertainty in her voice. Hannah either didn't hear or chose to ignore her mother. Her focus was entirely on the fallen mare, whose ears had swiveled forward at the sound of the child approach. Unlike her reaction to the adults, the horse didn't thrash as Hannah drew closer. Instead, she grew eerily still, her dark eyes fixed on the small figure in the yellow raincoat. "It okay?" Hannah said, her voice carrying a certainty that belied her 8 years. "Nobody's going to hurt you anymore. You found the right place." Dr. Vasquez held her breath as Hannah closed the final distance, kneeling in the gravel just 3 feet from the mare's head. One sudden movement from the frightened animal could be catastrophic. "Hannah," Allison whispered, her hand covering her mouth in fear. But something remarkable was happening. The mare's breathing, though still labored, had steadied. Her eyes, previously rolling in panic, were now focused intently on Hannah's face. The child extended her small hand, palm down, and waited. "She's pregnant, isn't she?" Hannah said without looking back at the adults. That's why she came here, she knew. Dr. Vasquez and Allison exchanged baffled glances. How could Hannah possibly know the mare was seeking help specifically for her pregnancy? Yet the conviction in the child's voice was unshakable. After what seemed like an eternity, the mare stretched her neck forward just enough for her muzzle to touch Hannah's outstretched fingers. A collective sigh of relief escaped from the watching adults. "Her name is Ember," Hannah announced, gently stroking the mare's forehead. "She told me." Allison started to correct her daughter. Wild horses didn't have names, and they certainly didn't tell people what they were. But Dr. Vasquez silenced her with a look. Whatever was happening between Hannah and the mare was working, and that was all that mattered for now. "Hannah," Dr. Vasquez said softly, "can you keep Ember calm? While I check her wounds, we need to get her inside where it's warm." Anna nodded solemnly, continuing to stroke the mare's face and murmuring words too quiet to hear over the falling rain. Remarkably, when Dr. Vasquez slowly approached this time, the mare Ember remained still, though her eyes watched the veterinarians. "Every move, good girl," Dr. Vasquez soothed as she began her examination. "The cut on her flank needs stitches, but it's not as deep as it looked. She's exhausted and dehydrated," though a truck engine rumbled in the distance, headlights cutting through the downpour as William Brooks's pickup turned into the shelter driveway. He jumped out, rain immediately soaking through his work clothes. "Got your message," he called, jogging over to them. "What's the emergency?" He stopped short when he saw his daughter kneeling beside the injured mare. "Hannah, get away from there." "It's okay, Dad," Hannah said with that same unusual calmness. "This is Ember. She needs our help." William looked questioningly at his wife, who could only shake her head in bewilderment. She just connected with her. Somehow the horse was panicking until Hannah approached. "We need to get her to the stable," Dr. Vasquez explained. "She's pregnant and in distress. I don't like the way her breathing sounds." William assessed the situation with a practiced eye. Before taking construction work in town, he'd spent years working on ranches. "We'll need the trailer. Even with sedation, we can't carry her that far." "No sedation," Hannah said firmly, still stroking Ember's neck. "She'll follow me, honey." "That's not possible," Allison began. But Hannah was already shifting, moving Ember's head and speaking softly into her ear. To everyone's amazement, the mare struggled to rise, her legs trembling with the effort. Hannah stood, keeping one hand on Ember's neck, providing an anchor as the horse found her footing. "See." Hannah looked at the adults with a hint of satisfaction. "She trusts me, I'll be damned." William muttered, watching as his daughter began to slowly lead the mare toward the shelter, one cautious step at a time. Dr. Vasquez grabbed her medical bag. "Let's not question it for now, Allison. Call Diego. We might need his experience with difficult horses. And prepare the foaling stall. I have a feeling we'll need it sooner rather than later." As they followed Hannah and Ember toward the shelter's small stable, Allison couldn't help but notice how naturally her daughter moved with the horse, as if they'd known each other for years instead of minutes. It reminded her of other instances when Hannah had shown unusual insight with animals. The shelter dog no one could handle that had immediately calmed in her presence, the injured hawk that had allowed Hannah to splint its wing. William must have been thinking the same thing. "I've never seen anything like it," he said quietly as they watched Hannah guide Ember into the dry safety of the stable. "It's like she speaks their language." "Always has," Allison replied. "But this is different. I don't know what this is." Inside, the stable, warm yellow light chased away the gloom of the storm. Hannah led Ember to the largest stall, which had been prepared with fresh straw. Only when the mare was safely inside did Hannah step away, though she remained close, speaking reassurances. As Dr. Vasquez began a more thorough examination, "No brands, Dr. Vasquez," noted, running her hands carefully over Ember's trembling body. "But these rope marks are recent, and look at this." She pointed to circular marks on the mare's flanks, spur marks. "And harsh ones, too." William frowned. "Someone was trying to break her the old way, the cruel way. She ran away," Hannah said, watching as Dr. Vasquez cleaned a wound on Ember's flank. "She had protector, baby." Dr. Vasquez paused, stethoscope in hand. "Hannah, how do you know these things about Ember?" The child shrugged, a gesture too adult for her small frame. "I just know, like I know her baby's coming soon, really soon," as if confirming Hannah's words. Ember shifted uncomfortably, a low wicker distress escaping her. Dr. Vasquez quickly placed a stethoscope against the mare's swollen belly, listening intently. Her expression grew serious. The foe's heartbeat is elevated. In these contractions, she looked up at William and Alice. "And Hannah's right. This mare is in the early stages of labor. But something's not right." A truck door slammed outside, followed by hurried footsteps. Diego Lopez appeared in the stable doorway, his weathered face creased with concern beneath his cowboy hat. "Allison called, said you found a pregnant mare." His eyes widened as he took in the scene. "Dios mio," he breathed. "Where did she come from?" "We were hoping you might know." William said, "She just showed up during the storm." Diego approached slowly, his experienced gaze taking in every detail of the mare. When he reached her head, he gently lifted her lip, examining her teeth. "This is not just any Mustang," he said gravely. "This is one of the Whispering Meadows herd, the special ones." "Whispering Meadows?" Dr. Vasquez asked. "Isn't that protected land?" Diego nodded, his expression darkening. "Supposed to be, but I heard rumors that Grant has been rounding them up illegally." Theodore Grant Williams' voice hardened at the name of Stonehaven's wealthiest rancher. "You're saying he stole wild horses from protected land?" "I'm saying this may wander onto his property by accident," Diego replied. "And these marks," he gestured to the spur wounds, "this is the work of Tyler Grant's son. I'd recognize his handiwork anywhere work for them one. Season before I quit." Couldn't stomach their methods. Hannah, who had been quietly stroking Ember's neck, spoke up. She says the bad man took her whole family. They're all in the big corral with the high fences. The adults exchanged uneasy glances. Hannah's strange connection with the mare was one thing, but this claim was something else entirely. Hannah Allison began gently. "Horses can't actually talk." To a shrill whinny from Ember cut her off. The mare's legs buckled, and she sank to her knees in the straw sides, heaving more prominently. Now Carmen Allison's voice rose with concern. Dr. Vasquez was already moving, medical bag in hand. Labor's progressing too quickly. Stress, dehydration, injury. It's all contributing. She looked at Diego. "I might need your help if there are complications." Diego nodded grimly. "I've delivered FOS before, even difficult ones." "What can we do?" William asked, putting a protective arm around Hannah's shoulders. "Pray that the FO is positioned correctly," Dr. Vasquez said, pulling on gloves. And maybe, she glanced at Hannah with a hint of uncertainty, "maybe let Hannah stay. Ember seems calmer with her outside." The storm continued to rage, rain lashing against the stable roof as a demanding entrance. But inside, a different kind of storm was brewing, one that would soon draw in not just the Brooks family, but the entire town of Stonehaven. And noticed the headlights that briefly illuminated the driveway before continuing past the shelter. A black truck with the distinctive TG brand of the Grant Ranch emblazoned on its door. But had they seen the driver's face, they would have recognized the cold, calculating expression of Theodore Grant himself. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The stable had grown quiet, save for Ember's labored breathing and the occasional encouragement from Dr. Vasquez. 4 hours had passed since the mayor's collapse, and the veterinarian's expression grew more concerned with each passing minute. William had brought in extra lamps, casting the straw-filled space in a warm glow that couldn't quite dispel the tension. "It's taking too long," Dr. Vasquez murmured, checking Ember's vital signs again. "She's exhausted, and the foe's heart rate is dropping." Hannah sat cross-legged near Ember's head, her small hand resting on the mare's neck. She hadn't moved in hours, refusing food and speaking only to whisper reassurances to the suffering animal. Allison watched her daughter with a mixture of pride and worry. "Should we call the equine specialist in Cedar Ridge?" Allison asked, handing Dr. Vasquez a fresh towel. "I already did." "Roads are flooded from the storm." He can't get through until morning. Dr. Vasquez's voice was tight with frustration. And I'm not sure we have until morning. Diego, who had been watching from the corner, stepped forward. I've seen this before. The FO is probably turned wrong. Dr. Vasquez nodded grimly. I think you're right. I'll have to try to reposition it. But with her this week, she left the implications unspoken. She won't give up, Hannah said. Suddenly, her voice, small but firm in the quiet, stable Ember, says she didn't come this far to lose her baby. Now William and Allison exchanged concerned glances. Hannah's strange announcements about what Ember was saying had continued throughout the evening, becoming more specific. And troubling Hannah's sweetheart, Allison began gently, I know you care about Ember. But she was the lead mare. Hannah interrupted, her gaze never leaving Ember's face. Before the bad men came, that's why they wanted to break her the most, because she was strong. Diego's head snapped up, the lead mare. He looked at Ember with renewed interest. There were rumors about the Whispering Meadows herd having a distinctive lead mare, Chestnut, with a perfect white star, just like her. How would Hannah know that? William whispered to Allison before she could respond. Ember let out a pained wicker, her body tensing with another contraction. Dr. Vasquez moved quickly, positioning herself to check the foal's progress. This is it, she said. She's pushing, but something's definitely wrong. Diego, I'm going to need your help. The old ranch hand rolled up his sleeves and joined Dr. Vasquez at Ember's hindquarters. Tell me what to do. As the adults worked frantically to save both mare, and full the storm outside finally began to subside. The thunder grew distant, and the rain softened to a gentle patter against the roof. In the newly settled quiet, a sound cut through the night tires on wet gravel, followed by the slam of a car door. William straightened, listening. Someone's here at this hour. Allison checked her watch. 11:42 p.m. Heavy footsteps approached the stable, accompanied by the jingle of spurs. The door swung open with unnecessary force, sending a startled barn cat scurrying for cover. Theodore Grant filled the doorway, his imposing frame silhouetted against the outdoor security lights. Despite the late hour, he was immaculately dressed in pressed jeans, a crisp white shirt, and a black sun that shadowed his face. I heard you found something that belongs to me, he said without preamble, his voice carrying the weight of a man accustomed to being obeyed. William stepped forward, positioning himself between Grant and the stall where Ember lay. This is private property, Grant, and it's nearly midnight. Grant removed his hat, revealing steel gray hair and cold blue eyes that took in every detail of the scene. His gaze settled on Ember, and his thin lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. That's my mare you got there. Brooks broke free during the early storm, too. Days ago. I've been tracking her since. Your mare. Diego stepped away, remember, wiping his hands on a towel. This is a wild Mustang from the Whispering Meadows herd, protected animals on protected land. Grant's eyes hardened as they landed on Diego. Lopez didn't expect to find you here. He turned back to William. The first, don't know what stories he's been telling you, but that horse was legally captured on my property, strayed from public land with rope burns and spur marks. Dr. Vasquez challenged, not looking up from her work. With Ember, those aren't standard handling methods for wild horses. Mr. Grant, how I train my stock isn't your concern. Dr. Grant took a step forward, but William didn't budge. I got registration papers in my truck. That mare is registered as Diamond's lady, captured on my eastern property line 6 months ago. She has a name already. Hannah's clear voice cut through the tension. She had risen to her feet, small body placed protectively beside Ember's head. Her name is Ember. Grant's gaze fell on Hannah, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face before it was replaced by a practiced smile. Hello there, little lady. You must be the Brooks girl I've heard about. He crouched down, attempting to appear less intimidating. You've been taking good care of my horse, I see. Hannah met his eyes without flinching. She's not yours. You stole her. You stole all of them. Hannah, Allison admonished, moving to her daughter's side. Grant straightened the facade of friendliness. Vanishing children should be in bed at this hour, not spreading wild tales. Mr. Grant, Dr. Vasquez interjected. Whatever the circumstances, this mare is in active labor with complications. She can't be moved, and she needs immediate medical attention. Surely you could discuss ownership tomorrow. As if to emphasize the point, Ember let out a distressed whinny, her body shuddering with effort. Grant hesitated, the businessman in him calculating the value of a pregnant mare against the cost of negative publicity. Fine. He conceded finally, but I'll be back at first light with my papers and trailer. That mare and her FO will be coming with me. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. And Lopez, I'd be careful about spreading rumors about my business practices. This town doesn't take kindly to troublemakers. The threat hung in the air long after Grant had departed. Diego spat on the ground where the rancher Had stood that man has no shame. He muttered those registration papers will be forged. He's been stealing Mustangs for months, selling them to rodeos and slaughter houses across state lines. Can you prove it, William? Asked Diego, shook his head. Nobody wants to cross Theodore Grant in this county. He owns half the businesses and most of the politicians. We can worry about Grant tomorrow, Dr. Vasquez said firmly. Right now, we have more pressing concerns, SFO. Is Breach and Ember's fading? I need everyone focused the next 2 hours past intense concentration, as Dr. Vasquez and Diego worked to reposition the FO. Ember's strength was clearly waning, her once desperate struggles now reduced to feeble attempts to rise. It's no use, Dr. Vasquez finally admitted, fatigue evident in her voice. I can't turn the FO, and she doesn't have the strength for a Syrian. We're losing them both. Hannah, who had remained quietly vigilant, and Ember's head suddenly spoke. She needs to stand. What, Dar? Vasquez looked up in surprise. Ember says she needs to stand. Wild horses don't give birth lying down unless something's wrong. Hannah, honey, Allison began. Dr. Vasquez knows what's best. No, Diego interrupted as weathered. Face thoughtful, the girl might be right. I've seen wild Mars deliver. Standing, it changes the angle, uses gravity. She's too weak to stand. Dr. Vasquez objected. We can help her, William suggested Diego. And I can support her weight. Dr. Vasquez hesitated, then nodded. At this point, we have nothing to lose. What followed was a coordinated effort that seemed nearly impossible. William and Diego positioned themselves on either side of Ember, while Dr. Vasquez prepared for delivery with gentle but firm hands. The men urged the exhausted mare to her feet. Her legs trembled violently, threatening to buckle at any moment. That's it. Hannah encouraged, moving to stand in front of Ember, her small hand stroking the mare's face. You can do it, Ember. Show them how strong you are. Whether it was Hannah's words or some last reserve of strength, Ember remained standing, supported heavily by the two men. Almost immediately, her body tense with powerful contraction. Something's happening. Dr. Vasquez reported position behind the mare. The folds shifted. I can see a hoof now. Hannah never left Ember's sight, maintaining eye contact and whispering encouragements that no one else could hear. The mare's eyes, previously glazed with exhaustion, seemed to sharpen with renewed purpose. Another contraction coming. Dr. Vasquez warned us, as if this doesn't work. The stable fell silent as Ember gathered her remaining strength. Then, with a tremendous effort that nearly took both men off their feet, she pushed. The shoulders are clear, Dr. Vasquez announced, her professional detachment briefly giving way to excitement. One more push, girl, with a final heave, and a sound somewhere between a groan and a triumphant whinny. Ember delivered her FO. The tiny horse slipped into Dr. Vasquez's waiting arms, still enclosed in the birth sack. Quickly, the veterinarian instructed, laying the FO on clean straw and working to clear its airway. It's not breathing. Hannah broke away from Ember, who had finally collapsed back to the straw, and knelt beside the motionless FO without hesitation. She began rubbing its chest with her small hands. Come on, she whispered fiercely. Your mama needs you to be okay. For what seemed like an eternity, nothing happened. Then a tiny shudder passed the foe's body, followed by a weak cough. Another shudder, stronger this time, and suddenly the newborn was breathing, its small sides heaving with the effort of drawing air into untested lungs at the filly. Dr. Devasquet announced, relief evident in her voice as she continued to clear mucus from the foe's nostrils. And she's a fighter. Ember raised her head, weakly nickering softly to her baby, as if responding to her command. The newborn filly made her first attempt to rise on impossibly spindly legs. She failed, collapsing back to the straw, but immediately tried again. She's perfect, Hannah breathed, watching the wobbly attempts with shining eyes. Her name is Hope. Allison knelt beside her daughter, wrapping an arm around her narrow shoulders. Hannah, how did you know what to do? How did you know Ember needed to stand? Hannah looked up at her mother, her expression surprisingly adult in its seriousness. I told you. Ember told me before Allison could respond. William's hand came to rest on her shoulder. She looked up to see him shaking his head slightly. Let it go for now. The sun was just beginning to rise, painting the eastern sky with streaks of pink and gold, as Dr. Vasquez finished tending to both mother and foe. Ember was severely depleted but stable, while the filly Hope, as everyone had now accepted, was showing remarkable vigor for a newborn that had experienced such a difficult entry into the world. They're not out of the woods yet, Dr. Vasquez cautioned, packing away her equipment. Ember needs fluids and antibiotics, and will need to watch Hope for signs of oxygen deprivation. But they both got a fighting chance now, which is more than they'd had with Grant, Diego said, darkly glancing at his watch. He'll be here soon with his papers and his trailer. And what then? Allison asked, the joy of the successful, both tempered by the looming threat. If those papers look legitimate, they won't be. Diego insisted, but they'll look convincing enough for The law William paced the length of the stall, his expression troubled. Even if we could prove the papers are forged, it's our word against Grant's, and Diego's right in this county. Grant's word carries weight. We can't let him take them. Hannah had curled up in the straw, beside Hope, one hand resting protectively on the filly's neck. He'll hurt them again. The adults exchanged uncomfortable glances. None wanted to tell the child the harsh realities of property law and local politics. Hannah, Allison, began gently. Sometimes she was interrupted by the rumble of an engine outside, followed by the distinctive sound of a heavy-duty trailer being backed up to the stable entrance. Theodore Grant had returned right on schedule, stay with Ember and Hope. William instructed Hannah, moving toward the stable door. Allison called Kevin. Deputy Kevin Morgan was a family friend and the only law enforcement officer in Stonehaven who wasn't firmly in Grant's pocket. Whether he could help remained to be seen, but having an official witness couldn't hurt. Grant entered the stable flanked by two ranch hands, both wearing sidearms that seemed unnecessarily prominent. He carried a leather portfolio that he promptly thrust at William. Registration papers, proof of ownership, and a signed affidavit from the county inspector confirming Diamond's lady was legally captured on my property. Grant announced without preamble. I've also brought a trailer equipped for a mayor and FOI. Assume the delivery was successful against all odds. Dr. Vasquez replied coolly, no, thanks to the condition she was in when she arrived. Grant's eyes narrowed, meaning Diego stepped forward. That wild mare was nearly beaten to death. Rope burns, spur wounds, dehydration. Whoever trained her should be charged with animal cruelty. One of Grant's ranch hands, a young man with a hard face and empty eyes, took a threatening step forward, but Grant held up a hand to stop him. My son Tyler has unconventional methods, I'll admit, but effective ones that may learn respect. His gaze shifted to where Hannah sat with the newborn. The little filly, on the other hand, should be more manageable from the start. Hannah looked up, her young face set in a defiance that startled even her parents. You can't have them. Grant's practiced smile returned, though it didn't reach his eyes. Now, little lady, I understand you've gotten attached. That's natural, but these horses are valuable. Breeding stock for my operation. Tell you what, when this filly is weaned, I'll give you first pick of next spring's puppies. I got a champion lab due to whelp in March. I don't want a puppy, Hannah replied. Evenly, I want you to leave Ember and Hope alone. Grant's smile tightened. That's not how ownership works, young lady. Now, if you'll excuse me, he gestured his men. Get the mare. Info. Loaded, we're losing daylight. You can't move them. Yet Dr. Vasquez interjected, stepping between Grant's men and the stall. The mare is severely weakened from a difficult birth, and the FO is less than 6 hours old. Transporting them now could kill them both. Grant's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. And how long before they can be safely moved? At least a week for the mare, Dr. Vasquez replied without hesitation. She suffered severe trauma and blood loss. The FO should remain with her mother for at least 48 hours to ensure proper bonding and nursing. A week, Grant scoffed. Ridiculous. I've transported fresh foal mares same day for years, and how many survived? Diego muttered just loud enough to be heard. Grant ignored him, instead fixing Dr. Vasquez with a cold stare. You have until tomorrow morning. I'll return with a trailer at 9 a.m., and I expect both animals to be ready for transport. He turned to William. And if there are any complications, Brooks, I'll hold you personally responsible. The threat hung in the air as Grant collected his paperwork and gestured for his men to follow him out. The elder ranch hand obeyed immediately, but the younger one, Tyler, Grant Theodore's son, lingered, his gaze fixed on Ember with an expression that made Hannah instinctively move closer to the mare. That horse needs to learn who's boss, Tyler said, fingering the cruel spurs on his boots. Thought we'd broken her spirit before she ran off. Guess we'll have to try harder. With a final glance at Hannah, he followed his father to the stable door. Had barely closed behind them when William pulled out his phone. I'm calling Kevin right now. There has to be something we could do. Those papers looked real enough, Allison said worriedly. And if the county inspector did sign off bribe, no doubt. Diego spat. Like everyone else Grant needs. Dr. Vasquez began methodically checking Ember's vital signs. The law may or may not be on our side, but medicine is that mare genuinely cannot be safely transported tomorrow. I'll sign an official veterinary directive if needed. Hannah remained beside Hope, who had finally managed to stand and was now nursing weakly from her mother. The little girl's face was set in a determination that seemed far older than her 8 years. He's lying, she said quietly. Ember was never on his land. He caught her and the others in the canyon where they were protected. William paused, his dialing, looking at his daughter with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Hannah Honey, how could you possibly know? That Hannah stroked Hope's fuzzy mane. I told you, Ember told me. That's Allison began, then stopped unsure how to address her daughter's continued insistence on this impossible communication. Diego stepped closer, regarding Hannah thoughtfully. There are stories, he said slowly, about certain people who can sense things from animals. My grandmother believed in such gifts, Diego. Allison warned, not wanting to encourage what she saw as a child's fantasy, whether she heard it from the horse or figured out some other way. Dr. Vasquez interjected. Practically, Hannah's claim about the canyon is actually worth investigating. If Grant was capturing Mustangs from protected areas of Whispering Meadows, that's a federal offense. William nodded, returning to his phone. I'll mention to Kevin. He can at least look into it. Deputy Kevin Morgan arrived 20 minutes later, his official vehicle splashing through puddles left by the night storm. He was a solidly built man with kind eyes that belied his official demeanor, and he'd known the Brooks family since before Hannah was born. Got your call, he said, nodding to William as he entered the stable. So Theodore's claiming ownership of our miracle mare? William quickly explained the situation. While Kevin examined the papers Grant had left behind, these looked legitimate, the deputy admitted. Reluctantly, the county inspector's signature is authentic. I know Frank scroll when I see it, and the capture location is listed as the eastern boundary of Grant's property, which does occasionally see Mustangs crossing over from public lands. But they weren't there, Hannah insisted from her position. Beside Ember and Hope, they were in the hidden canyon with the waterfall, the special place. Kevin's eyebrows rose as he looked at Hannah. The hidden canyon. You mean Spirit Canyon? That's well within the protected area. Spirit Canyon has a waterfall at its western edge. Diego confirmed it a natural shelter for the herds, especially in winter, but it's also nearly impossible to access with vehicles unless you know the old logging roads. Kevin mused, which Grant would give his family's history in the timber business before they switched to cattle. William leaned forward eagerly. So if we could prove the horses were taken from Spirit Canyon instead of Grant's property, it would invalidate these papers and potentially bring federal charges. Kevin finished. But proof is a problem. It's been months since the initial capture. According to these documents, any physical evidence would be long gone. Not all evidence, Diego said thoughtfully. Each Mustang herd has distinctive adaptations to their specific territory. The Whispering Meadows herd, especially those from Spirit Canyon, have uniquely shaped hooves, slightly narrow with thicker walls from generations of navigating the canyon's rocky terrain. Dr. Vasquez looked up from checking Ember's for fluids. That's actually true. Different terrain does create evolutionary adaptations in wild horse populations. I could examine Ember's hooves, compare them to standard measurements for Mustangs from Grant's eastern property area. Would that stand up in court? Allison asked. Hopefully Kevin scratched his chin, maybe with expert testimony, but it would be stronger if we had more photographs of Grant's operation, eyewitness accounts of the capture location. The other horses could tell us. Hannah offered, her voice small but confident. Everyone turned to look at her. The ones still at Grant's ranch, they'd know. An awkward silence followed. William cleared his throat. Kevin, Hannah has been very intuitive about Ember, seems to understand her somehow. Kevin's expression softened as he looked at Hannah. Is that so? Well, unfortunately, the judge might want something more concrete than horse testimony, kiddo. I could show you where it happened. Hannah persisted. Ember knows the way. Hannah, that's not Allison began. But Diego interrupted. Wait, the girl might be onto something. He turned to Kevin. Spirit Canyon is remote, but there would be evidence of a large-scale capture operation, tire tracks, broken branches, maybe even dropped equipment if the ground has been undisturbed since the capture. The heavy rains would have washed away most tracks by now. Kevin pointed out, not if they use the North Ridge. Access, Diego counted. That area is under heavy tree cover, and they would have needed to set up temporary corral. Those leave marks, post, holes, disturbed earth, the kind of things that last. Kevin considered this as thin, but worth checking out. I can get a warrant to access Spirit Canyon based on the possibility of federal violations. He glanced at his watch. But not today. The earliest would be tomorrow. And Grant is coming for the horses at 9 a.m. I'll have my medical directive ready. Dr. Vasquez assured them that should buy us at least a few more days. And if it doesn't, Allison voiced the fear. They all shared. Grant isn't known for respecting authority. That doesn't align with his interests, then we'll have to find another way, William said firmly, putting an arm around his wife's shoulders as the adults discussed strategies and legal options. Hannah remained beside Ember, and Hope seemingly oblivious to the conversation. She stroked the filly's fuzzy coat with gentle fingers, while her other hand rested on Ember's neck. To anyone watching closely, it would appear the little girl was listening intently not to humans but to something only she could hear. I know, she whispered. Softly to Ember, I know you're scared, but I won't let him take you back there. I promise. The day passed in a flurry of activity. Dr. Vasquez examined Ember's hooves and documented her findings, confirming Diego's theory about the distinctive Spirit Canyon adaptations. Kevin made calls to the Federal Bureau of Land Management, laying groundwork for an investigation. William and Allison took shifts, caring for Ember and Hope, ensuring both received the critical care they needed after their ordeal. Hannah refused to leave the stable even for meals. Allison brought her sandwiches and juice, watching with growing concern as her daughter maintained her silent vigil beside the horses. She needs to sleep in her own bed tonight, William murmured to Allison. As evening approached, this can't be healthy. I've tried talking to her, Allison replied, watching Hannah braiding sections of Ember's mane with careful fingers. She's convinced Grant will come back in the night if she leaves. Them unprotected, William sighed, running a hand through his hair. Maybe I should stay here overnight, then set her mind at ease. I'll stay too, Diego offered from where he was repairing a broken stall door. I don't trust Grant either. Men like him are used to taking what they want, law or no law. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the stable floor, Dr. Vasquez completed her final checks for the day. Ember's improving, but slowly the antibiotics are helping with the infection from her wounds. Hope seems strong despite the difficult birth she's nursing. Well, will your medical directive hold against Grant? Allison asked, quietly stepping away from Hannah. Dr. Vasquez's expression was grim. Legally, yes. But Grant has ignored medical directives before when it suited him 3 years ago. He transported a stallion with a broken leg against my explicit instructions. A horse had to be put down the next day. Then we need a backup plan. William decided. The sound of tires on gravel interrupted their conversation. Everyone tensed, fearing Grant had returned early, but it was Kevin's patrol vehicle that pulled up outside. The deputy entered the stable looking troubled. Just got word that Judge Patterson will be out of town tomorrow. Convenient timing, since he's the only judge in the county who might have granted our warrant without question. So we've got nothing? William asked, disheartened. Not nothing, Kevin corrected. I spoke with the BLM regional director. She's sending an investigator, but not until day after tomorrow. The problem is keeping Ember and Hope safe until then. Dr. Vasquez has a medical directive, Allison said. Kevin nodded, which Grant is likely to challenge. And with Patterson and gone will be Judge Harmon hearing any disputes. Harmon, Diego spat, demands practically on Grant's peril. So what do we do? William demanded before Kevin could answer. A small voice spoke up. We need to take them back. Everyone turned to find Hannah standing in the stall doorway, her eyes bright with determination. Take them back where, sweetie? Allison asked gently. To Spirit Canyon, Hannah replied, as if it were the most obvious solution in the world. Back to their home, where they'll be protected. The adults exchanged uncomfortable glances. Hannah, William began carefully. Spirit Canyon is over 20 miles from here through rough country. We can't just— Why not? Diego interrupted, a thoughtful expression crossing his weathered face. The canyon is federal land, that the horses were there when the BLM investigator arrives. You can't be serious, Dr. Vasquez objected, moving Ember and her. Condition would be risky, Diego acknowledged, but less risky than leaving her here for Grant to take. Once she's back on his property, who knows what will happen. Kevin cleared his throat. What you're suggesting borders on illegal transport, disputed property across county lines, only if the property rightfully belongs to Grant. Diego counted, which we all know it does. A tense silence fell over the stable. William paced a few steps, clearly torn. Even if we wanted to try something like this, and I'm not saying we should, how will we transport a weakened mare and newborn FO 20 miles without Grant finding out? He probably has people watching this place already. The Old Fire Road, Diego suggested. It runs behind the shelter property through national forest land, barely used anymore except by rangers. That still leaves us with a problem with transportation. Dr. Vasquez pointed out Ember is too weak to walk that distance, and we can't exactly drive a horse trailer through Forest Service roads without attracting attention. Jackson has a trailer, Hannah said. Suddenly all eyes turned to her again. Old Mr. Jackson at the Avid store, he has a small trailer he uses for his goats. Would fit Ember and Hope. Allison blinked in surprise. How do you know that? Hannah, I saw it when we went to get chicken feed last month. Hannah explained. It's painted green, so it looks like a Forest Service vehicle. He told me he got at an auction. The adults looked at each other, momentarily taken aback by the unexpected practicality of Hannah's suggestion. Harold Jackson is no fan of Theodore Grant. Diego confirmed slowly. Lost part of his land too. Grant, in a questionable property dispute 10 years back. This is crazy. Dr. Vasquez said, shaking her head. Even with a suitable trailer, moving Ember now could seriously compromise her recovery. And not moving her could mean her death. Diego counted grimly. You know what happened to horses that fight back at Grant's ranch? Kevin held up his hands. I need to be very clear here as an officer of the law. I cannot be part of any plan to remove these horses from the shelter without legal authority, nor can I stop you from making medical decisions about animals in your care. He gave William a meaningful look. I will say that I have patrol duties on the south side of the county tomorrow morning. Won't be anywhere near the shelter or the Forest Service roads. Until well after noon, the meeting was clear Kevin wouldn't stop them, but he also couldn't help we need to move before dawn. Diego said already calculating logistics. Grant said 9 a.m., but he's the type to arrive early to catch people off guard. This is insane, Allison protested. We could all face charges. Not if the horses are proven to be illegally captured federal property, William pointed out. Then we'd just be returning them to protected land. Dr. Vasquez sighed heavily. I stress if we were to attempt something this foolish, I'd need to prepare medical supplies for Ember, portable IVs, antibiotics, emergency equipment, in case she collapses again. So we're really considering this. Allison asked, looking from face to face in the silence that followed. Hannah's voice was steady. And sure, Ember wants to go home. She knows the way William knelt beside his daughter Hannah. Are you absolutely certain about this? About what Ember wants? Hannah met her father's gaze. Without wavering, more certain than I've ever been about anything. William held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded once, and stood. All right, let's make a plan. As night fell fully over Stonehaven, the small group huddled in the stable office. Speaking in hushed tones, Diego sketched a rough map of the Forest Service roads leading to Spirit Canyon. Dr. Vasquez prepared a medical kit while explaining to Allison what signs of distress to watch for in both Ember and Hope during transport. William slipped away to call Harold Jackson about borrowing his trailer for an early morning delivery, careful to keep the details vague, but emphasizing the urgency. Outside the shelter, a black truck cruised slowly past, headlights off. Inside, Tyler Grant watched the stable with cold, calculating eyes before pressing a button on his phone. Dad. Yes, something's going on at the shelter. A lot of activity for this late. He listened for a moment. No, I can't see exactly what. Want to get closer. Another pause. Understood. I'll keep watch until midnight, then circle back at 4 a.m. As he ended the call, his gaze lingered on the warm light spilling from the stable windows. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. Whatever the Brooks family was planning, they were about to learn a hard lesson about crossing. Theodore Grant the night seemed to stretch endlessly as the small group prepared for their daring plan. William had returned with good news. Harold Jackson had not only agreed to loan his trailer, but insisted on driving it himself. Old scores to settle, William explained, relaying Jackson's words. By 3 a.m., the shelter parking lot was silent, save for the gentle patter of light rain that had begun falling an hour earlier. Inside the stable, Dr. Vasquez administered a final round of antibiotics to Ember, her expression troubled. I still think this is too risky, she murmured to Allison, who was packing supplies into waterproof bags. Ember's condition has improved, but she's nowhere near strong enough for this journey. What choice do we have? Allison replied, her hands briefly pausing. If Grant gets it back, she couldn't finish the sentence, the implications too disturbing. The stall. Hannah sat beside Hope, who had curled up against her mother's warm flank. Despite the late hour, the child showed no signs of fatigue, her focus entirely on the horses. Hannah needs to stay here, William said firmly, joining the women. It's too dangerous, and she needs sleep. Allison nodded in agreement, though her expression was doubtful. Tried telling her that she hasn't left their side for more than 5 minutes since they arrived. She's 8 years old, William pointed out. She doesn't get a vote. One of us can stay with her while the others handle the transport. Diego entered the stable, shaking rain from his hat. Jackson's on his way with the trailer. Should be here in 20 minutes. Any sign of Grant's people? William asked. Nothing obvious, but that doesn't mean they're not watching. Diego glanced at Hannah. The girl coming with us? Absolutely not, Allison said firmly. Diego nodded, though something in his expression suggested he wasn't convinced this would be so simple. I've loaded the supplies in your truck, William. Basic equipment for the canyon, ropes, flashlights. First aid. We'll need to move quickly once Jackson arrives. William examined the makeshift plan. They'd sketched out. The old fire road would take them within 2 mi of Spirit Canyon's northern entrance. From there, they'd need to lead Ember and Hope on foot through a series of game trails that Diego knew from his years as a hunting guide. If we leave by 4 a.m., we should reach the canyon by sunrise. Diego calculated. The hardest part will be getting Ember into the trailer and off the shelter property. Without being spotted, I can create a distraction. If needed, Dr. Vasquez, offer a medical emergency call. To the other side of town, Tyler Grant has been watching from the road. I spotted his truck when I took out the trash. The sound of the stable door opening made everyone turn. Harold Jackson stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his oilskin coat. Despite being well into his 70s, the feed store owner stood tall and straight, his weathered face set with determination. Trails ready, he announced without preamble. Got it parked behind the storage shed like you asked. Forest Service logo still visible on the sides. His gaze traveled to the stall where Ember and Hope rested. So that's the mayor Grant's been hunting. Figured it might be when William called. You're taking a big risk. Helping us, Harold Allison said. Gratefully, Jackson's eyes hardened. Grant's taken enough from this town. About time someone stood up to him. He glanced at his watch. We should move. Tyler Grant drove past my place 20 minutes ago, headed toward town. Might be coming this way. The next moments were a flurry of activity. Dr. Vasquez prepared a mild sedative for Ember, just enough to keep her calm during loading, but not enough to further weaken her. Diego and William gathered the last of supplies, while Allison made final checks on Hope's condition. It's time to tell Hannah. William said reluctantly, moving toward the stall where his daughter still sat with the horses. Allison followed, rehearsing the explanation in her mind. Hannah would be upset, but surely she would understand why she couldn't come along. Hannah's sweetheart, William, began crouching beside his daughter. We're going to take Ember and Hope to a safe place. Now you need to stay here with Dr. Vasquez. We'll be back tomorrow. Hannah looked up, her expression surprisingly calm. I know you're taking them to Spirit Canyon. That's right, Allison said, relieved at her daughter's apparent understanding. It's going to be a difficult journey, not safe for a child. Ember won't go without me, Hannah stated simply, as if announcing that water was wet or the sky was blue. William and Allison exchanged glances. Honey, Ember will go where we lead her. William tried to explain gently, as if to contradict him. Ember raised her head, looking directly at Hannah, the mayor's eyes still weary from her ordeal, but clearer than they had been held. An unmistakable intelligence. We can discuss this later, Allison said, aware of the time pressure. Right now, we need to get Ember loaded. Diego and Jackson had positioned the trailer as close to the stable door as possible to minimize Ember's walking distance. William attached a lead rope to her halter, while Diego prepared to help support her weight, if necessary. Easy now, girl, William murmured, giving a gentle tug on the lead. Ember didn't move. Her hooves remained planted firmly in the straw, her gaze fixed on Hannah. Come on, Ember, William encouraged, pulling slightly harder. We're taking you to safety. The mayor still didn't budge. If anything, she seemed to lean away from the pressure of the lead rope. Diego tried next, offering a handful of oats and coaxing in soft Spanish. Ember ignored both the food and the gentle encouragement. We don't have time for this, Jackson muttered from the doorway, checking his watch nervously. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward. She's weak and frightened. The sedative should help, but it might take a few minutes to take effect. 10 minutes later, they were still trying. Despite the mild sedative, Ember refused to leave the stall. Each attempt was met with the same passive but unmovable resistance. Hope, sensing her mother's unease, had pressed herself into the corner of the stall, watching with wide, frightened eyes. This isn't working, William finally admitted, wiping sweat from his forehead. Despite the cool night, I told you, Hannah said quietly from where she sat. She won't go without me. The adults looked at each other, desperation growing as precious minutes ticked by. Maybe Hannah's right, Diego suggested reluctantly. I've seen horses form attachments to specific people. If Ember has bonded with Hannah, no. Allison interrupted firmly. We are not taking our 8-year-old daughter on a dangerous 20-mile trek through wilderness in the middle of the night. There has to be another way. Anna stood up and walked to Ember's head, placing one small hand on the mayor's muzzle. She whispered something that the others couldn't hear, then looked up at her parents. She's scared. Hannah explained. She remembers being trapped in a trailer before when the bad men took her, but she'll go if I show her it's safe. Hannah, William began, but Diego interrupted. We're out of options, William. It's nearly 4 a.m. If we don't move now, we risk being caught with a Hannah. Just helps load her, then stays behind? Dr. Vasquez suggested. Hannah shook her head. She'll panic. Once we're moving, if I'm not there, she needs to know Hope will be safe. Jackson, who had been watching from the doorway, spoke up unexpectedly. The girl knows her business. With that horse, sometimes animals see things in people that we don't. My wife was like that, had a way with the most difficult creatures. William and Allison withdrew a few steps, speaking in urgent whispers. We can't take her. Allison insisted it's too dangerous, and if we can't. Move, Ember. Without her, William counted. Grant will be here in 5 hours. You know what that means for both horses. Allison closed her eyes, briefly torn between impossible choices. If anything happened to Hannah, I'll guard her with my life, Diego promised. Having approached quietly, we all, the minutes continued to slip away as they debated. Finally, Allison looked at her daughter. So small beside the majestic mare, yet somehow perfectly in sync with the wild creature. She stays in the trailer with Ember and Hope the entire time. Allison finally conceded she does not set foot in the canyon itself, and we bring her straight back once the horses are safe. William nodded, relief visible on his face. Agreed. Hannah needed no instructions on how to lead Ember. With just the lightest touch on the mare's halter, she guided the weakened horse from the stall. Ember followed willingly, her trust in the child evident. In every careful step Hope stayed close to her mother's side, her spindly legs more confident than they had been hours earlier. Loading went smoother than anyone dared hope. Hannah walked directly into the trailer, and Ember followed without hesitation. Hope trotted in after them, curious and unafraid. Remarkable, Dr. Vasquez murmured, watching as Hannah settled beside Ember in the trailer's confined space. Jackson secured the trailer doors and turned to William. I'll drive, you follow with Diego in your truck. The less time we spend on public roads, the better. Allison hugged Hannah through the trailer side opening. We'll be right behind you. Do exactly as Diego says if there's any trouble. Hannah nodded solemnly. Ember says, thank you for helping her go home. The small convoy pulled away from the shelter just before 4 a.m. Lights dimmed to avoid attention. Jackson's truck and the attached trailer turned onto a narrow dirt road that skirted the edge of the shelter property before disappearing into the dense pine forest that bordered Stonehaven's northern edge. As they navigated the bumpy fire road, Allison kept glancing back, certain they would see headlights following, but the road behind remained dark, the rain-washed night silent, except for the rumble of their engines and the distant call of an owl inside the trailer. Hannah sat on a bed of straw, Ember's large head resting in her lap. The mare's eyes were half closed, partly from the mild sedative, but mostly from trust. Hope had curled up against her mother's side, already asleep despite the trailer's movement. Not much farther to the drop-off point, Diego said, consulting the hand-drawn map illuminated by the dashboard lights. From there, it's about 2 miles on foot to the canyon entrance. William nodded, his knuckles white on the steering. Will, how will we get Hannah back to town? Without being seen, Grant will have the main roads watched by morning, one problem at a time, Diego advised. First, we get the horses safe. The fire road grew increasingly rough as they climbed into the foothills. Fallen branches from a recent storm created obstacles that Jackson navigated with surprising skill. For a man his age, after nearly an hour of tense driving, they reached a small clearing where the road widened slightly. Jackson pulled to stop, killing the engine. This is as far as we go by vehicle. The old ranger station is just up that trail. From there, you'll need to go on foot. William parked behind him, and they all climbed out into the damp pre-dawn air. The rain had stopped, but water still dripped from the pine branches overhead, creating a gentle percussion in the forest silence. How's Ember? Dr. Vasquez asked, approaching the trailer. Hannah's face appeared at the opening. She's okay, tired, but okay. Hope keeps trying to explore. Unloading proved only slightly more challenging than loading. Ember was clearly exhausted from the journey, but with Hannah's encouragement, she stepped carefully from the trailer. Hope bounded out with the enviable energy of the very young, eager to investigate her new surroundings. We need to move quickly, Diego urged, shouldering a pack of supplies. Dawn will break in about an hour, and we want to be well within the canyon by then. Jackson would take the trailer back to town via a different route, creating a false trail. If anyone was tracking them, Dr. Vasquez would return to the shelter as if nothing had happened, ready to stall Grant when he arrived at 9 a.m. I'll tell him you've taken Hannah camping to distract her from the horses. Dr. Vasquez planned that should buy a few hours before he realizes something's wrong. William secured a lead rope to Ember's halter, though it seemed unnecessary with Hannah walking beside her. Allison carried Hope. When the filly tired the small horse surprisingly light in her arms, the trek through the forest was arduous. The trail, seldom used in recent years, had become overgrown in places and washed out in others. Diego led the way, occasionally using machete to clear fallen branches or encroaching shrubs. Ember moved slowly but steadily, drawing strength from some hidden reserve. Hannah remained at her side, one hand always in contact with the mayor offering silent encouragement twice. They stopped to allow Dr. Vasquez to check Ember's condition and administer fluids through a portable, for she's holding up better than I expected, the veterinarian admitted during the second stop her. Will to live is extraordinary. She knows where she's going, Hannah said. Simply she can feel it getting closer as the first hint of dawn lightened the eastern sky. They reached a ridge overlooking a steep decline. Below, a narrow canyon cut through the landscape, its walls rising sharply on either side. A small waterfall was visible at the far and feeding a stream that wound through the canyon floor spirit. Canyon Diego announced satisfaction evident in his voice, one of the most remote Mustang territories in the region, natural boundaries on three sides, limited access points, good water, and grazing, perfect home for a wild herd. Ember's head lifted at the sight, her nostrils flaring, as she caught the scent of the canyon's unique ecosystem. Beside her, Hope pranced with renewed energy, as if she too recognized their destination. How do we get down there? William asked, eyeing the steep descent with concern. There's a game trail about 50 yards east. Diego replied, gradual enough for the horses if we take it slow. As they prepared for the final leg of their journey, a sound cut through the dawn stillness, the distant but unmistakable rumble of an engine. Someone's on a fire road. Jackson said, his voice tight. With alarm, everyone froze, listening. As the sound grew louder, there was no mistaking the direction. It was coming from the way they had come Grant. Allison whispered, fear evident in her voice, or Forest Service. Diego suggested, though his expression showed he didn't believe it. Either way, we need to move. William decided, if we can get down into the canyon, we'll have cover. They hurried toward the game trail, Ember moving with newfound urgency. As the engine noise grew louder, Hope kept pace without being carried, sensing the tension in the adults around her. The game trail was steep but navigable, switching back and forth down the canyon wall. Under normal circumstances, they would have taken their time, ensuring each step was secure. Now, with the threat of discovery looming, they moved as quickly as safety allowed. They were halfway down when the engine sound stopped, replaced by the slam of car doors. They reached the clearing. Diego murmured, pausing to listen. More than one vehicle from the sound of it. How would they know to come here? Allison asked, cradling Hope close as they negotiated a particularly steep section. William's expression was grim. They must have been watching the shelter after all, saw us leave, or followed Jackson's trailer. Diego added, Grant has eyes everywhere in this county. Hannah, who had been silent during their hurried descent, suddenly spoke. We need a hurry. Ember says the other horses are close. What other horses? William asked, confusion momentarily overriding his concern about their pursuers. Before Hannah could answer, a distant sound echoed through the canyon, the unmistakable neigh of a wild horse, answered by several others. The herd. Diego breathed, his eyes widening. The whispering meadows herd must be in the canyon. Ember's family. Hannah confirmed, a smile breaking across her tired face. They'd been waiting for her. As they reached the canyon floor, the rising sun finally crested the eastern ridge, illuminating the landscape in a golden glow. The beauty of the moment was shattered by a shout from above. They had been spotted. Run, Diego urged, pointing toward a dense stand of trees near the waterfall. Get the horses to cover. Ember, despite her weakened state, broke into a trot, pulling Hannah along with her. Hope raced ahead, her small form darting between rocks and bushes with natural agility. William and Allison followed, while Diego took up a position behind them, watching the ridge from their new vantage point beneath the trees. They could see three figures descending the game trail, Tyler Grant in the lead, followed by two ranch hands. All carried rifles. They're armed. William observed unnecessarily, his arm tightening around Allison's shoulders, standard for tracking predators in these parts. Diego said grimly, but I don't think they're hunting mountain lions today. Hannah stood beside Ember, her small face set in a determination that seemed years beyond her age. We just need to get them to the waterfall. She said, past those rocks and they'll be safe. What's past the waterfall? Allison asked, glancing between her daughter and the distant rock formation. Hannah didn't answer directly. Ember knows it's where they all go to be safe. Diego was studying the terrain with the trackers. The canyon narrows. There creates a natural bottleneck, easy for the herd to defend, hard for people to access, especially with vehicles. The sound of loose rocks tumbling down the trail announced Tyler's progress. He was moving quickly for safety on the steep descent. He'll break his full neck. Diego muttered, we need to move. William urged, get to the waterfall. Before they reached the canyon floor, they set off at a fast walk, keeping to the shadow of the canyon wall. Where possible, Ember seemed to draw strength from familiar surroundings. Her pace steadier than it had been during their forest trek. Hope pranced alongside, occasionally darting ahead. before circling back, her earlier exhaustion, forgotten the canyon floor was surprisingly lush with patches of rich grass and clusters of hardy wildflowers growing between the rocks. A clear stream meandered to the center, fed by the waterfall ahead in better circumstances. It would have been a place of serene beauty. As they neared the waterfall, the nine they had heard earlier grew louder and more frequent beyond the tumbling water and the rocky outcropping. Beside it, movements became visible, the distinctive shapes of horses, at least a dozen, watching from a hidden meadow that opened up beyond the canyon's narrow passage. There, Diego confirmed, a note of awe in his voice. The whispering meadows heard. I haven't seen them in years. Ember's stride lengthened, her head held higher despite her fatigue. She nickered softly, a call that was immediately answered by several voices from the waiting herd. They recognize her. Hannah said, joy evident in her tired face. They know she's coming home. A shout echoed off the canyon walls. Tyler and his men had reached the canyon floor and spotted their quarry. The distance between the two groups was closing rapidly. Go. Diego urged, dropping back. Get Ember and hope to the herd. I'll slow them down. How? William demanded, unwilling to leave the older man behind. Diego pulled a small revolver from beneath his jacket. I won't shoot to kill, but they don't know that it'll make them more cautious in their approach. Diego, no. Allison protested. That's too dangerous. So, is letting grandson get his hands on these horses again? Diego replied grimly, now go, I'll be right behind you. There was no time to argue further. William took Allison's arm, and they hurried toward the waterfall. Hannah and the horses just ahead of them. As they reached the rocky passage beside the waterfall, where the canyon narrowed to barely 20 feet, across a single gunshot rang out, the sound amplified by the canyon walls. Hope, startled, darting forward to the passage toward the waiting herd. Ember hesitated, looking back at Hannah. Go on, Hannah. Encourage, giving the mayor a gentle push. You're free now. Ember took